I've spent my whole conscious life in the shadow of my older sister. My name is Allison, and I'm 29. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin where everyone knew Jessica as the star, and I was just the weird little sister. She sang in the choir, won beauty pageants, played the lead in every community theater production. Her photos hung in school hallways, and her name was spoken with admiration. Whenever people met me, the first thing they'd ask was, "Oh, are you Jessica's sister?" And then they'd move on without caring to learn anything else. It's not that people disliked me. They just didn't see me. I used to draw, collect dinosaur books, and spend hours alone in the school library. No matter what I did, people always compared me to her. Even when I won an award for a science fair project in high school, our principal just smiled and said, "Looks like talent runs in the family. Not just Jessica, huh?" My mom constantly used her as the golden standard. "Look how Jessica presents herself in public," or "Why can't you dress like your sister?" That was the soundtrack of my life. We grew up in the same house, but in different worlds. She lived in one filled with praise, admirers, and glitter. I lived in the shadows, in books and awkward silences. When I turned 18, I left for college in Milwaukee, as far away from Jessica as I could get. I specifically chose the University of Wisconsin because I knew she had gone to St. Paul. My parents wanted me to go there too, but I couldn't bear being in her orbit another 4 years. Milwaukee was gray and cold, but it was mine. I studied anthropology, worked in the university library, and later picked up a job at a vintage shop on Brady Street. That's where I met Liam, quiet, thoughtful, with messy hair and a shy smile. We connected at an exhibit on oceanic cultures. He said he wanted to be a teacher. We were both a little awkward, a little lost. It felt safe. 5 years later, when my dad had a heart attack, I moved back home with Liam to help out. My mom was drained from being his full-time caregiver, and I didn't want her to do it alone. Jessica, as always, couldn't make it. She was off to another must-attend conference in Chicago. She had reinvented herself as a motivational speaker. She traveled everywhere now, giving talks on unlocking your potential. "You were born to shine," she told audiences from glowing stages, while I was home changing adult diapers and scheduling cardiologist appointments. Liam and I moved into my old childhood bedroom upstairs. He got a teaching job at the community college. I took a position at the town archives. Life settled into a routine where Jessica was, once again, the gravitational center. She'd show up once every couple of months, wrapped in an expensive coat, with gifts and stories. Everyone would gather to hear about her trips to New York or London, her newest keynote, her latest interview. At first, I didn't notice how Liam looked at her. Who wouldn't look at Jessica? But then one night I went downstairs to get a glass of water. It was around midnight. I found them in the kitchen, Jessica sitting on the counter, laughing, and Liam standing way too close. They froze when they saw me. Jessica gave me her perfect smile and said, "Oh, we were just reminiscing about college days." I didn't say a word. I turned around and went back upstairs, heart pounding. After that, I started seeing more. The casual touches when she left. How Liam suddenly started caring more about his clothes. How her scarf was mysteriously left draped over our couch arm one afternoon. When I finally asked Liam directly if something was going on, he didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, "I don't know, Allison. Everything feels different since we came back here." I packed a bag and left the next morning. I moved in with Marissa, a friend from college who now worked as a lawyer in Madison. She had a 2-bedroom apartment and let me crash in the spare room. I cried in the shower and lay awake for hours, trying to understand how I'd lost everything, again, because of her. A few weeks later, my mom called. "Jessica wants to talk to you," she said. "She feels terrible." I agreed to meet her. Not for her, for my mom. We met at a cafe. Jessica looked stunning as always. New coat, glowing skin, not a hair out of place. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. "It wasn't planned. We just got close." I stared at her, and it hit me, she wasn't sorry. Not really. She just didn't like how this looked. She wanted me to forgive her so she could spin this into another empowerment story. My sister and I healed through honesty. I stood up and walked out. But the story didn't end there. 3 months later, I got a DM from a girl named Casey. She said she'd been dating Liam. Not before me. During. And apparently, I wasn't the only one. She said he was also seeing a barista named Jenna. And another woman who worked at the gym. I went numb. And then furious. What if Jessica wasn't some irresistible temptation? What if she was just another one of his trophies? I started collecting everything. Messages, screenshots, dates, receipts. And then I went to see Jessica. For the first time in my life, I didn't just take it. I didn't hide or cry or retreat. I brought the truth right to her face. I don't remember the first time Jessica laughed at me. I just know that by the time I was old enough to understand what humor was supposed to be, I had already become her favorite punchline. It started small, offhand comments in front of family or at school. If I wore something I liked, Jessica would tilt her head and say, "Is that a fashion experiment or a cry for help?" Then she'd laugh, and others would too. Because Jessica was charming, magnetic, the kind of girl who could make cruelty sound like comedy. Even teachers chuckled. By middle school, it got worse. I loved insects. I had posters of butterflies and beetles in my room, books filled with notes about their behaviors. It fascinated me. Jessica told everyone I was planning a bug funeral and made buzzing sounds whenever I entered a room. At lunch, She once dropped a dead ladybug on my tray and asked if I wanted to adopt it. I tried to push back a few times. Told my mom. Mom said, "That's just how sisters are." Jessica's joking. "Don't be so sensitive." Dad barely looked up from his paper. By high school, it was constant. If I got excited about something, a book, a project, even a song, I'd see it coming. That look in her eyes, like I had given her ammunition. The worst started when I began dating David. David wasn't flashy. He was soft-spoken, a little awkward, played piano and worked weekends at a mechanic shop to save up for community college. We met in junior year. He noticed me when I was reading outside the cafeteria, asked what book I was reading. That's how it started. He was kind, attentive, made me feel like I wasn't invisible for once. Jessica made it her mission to crush it. She called him Jazz Hands because he once played a classical piece at a school recital. She'd imitate his soft voice, drag out his words into a nasally falsetto at the dinner table. She told our friends he looked like a failed magician because of the way he dressed, black jeans and button-ups that were always just a bit wrinkled. One night, he came over to watch a movie with me. Jessica came downstairs mid-film, stared at him and said loudly, "Wow, this is who you've been hiding? Cute." I love how his personality screams, default character setting. He forced a smile. I forced a laugh. I hated her. David never said anything directly, but he stopped wanting to hang out at my house. We met in the park more often. I knew why. I just didn't know how to stop it. Senior year, prom season, he asked me to go with him. I said yes. It was the first time I'd felt genuinely happy in months. Jessica, of course, had a comment. "So we're going with Eeyore? That's adorable. You'll be the only girl there with a date who looks like he reviews light bulbs for fun." The night before prom, David texted me. "I think we should take a break. It's too much." That was it. No call. No conversation. Just a text. I didn't leave my room the whole weekend. Jessica didn't check on me, but she made a show of bringing home a bunch of her friends that Sunday night. I heard the music first. Loud bass, laughter, bottles clinking. I came downstairs and found the kitchen filled with her sorority friends from college, party hats, banners that read Freedom Night in glitter. "What the hell is this?" I asked. She grinned at me, completely unbothered. "Sweetie, you're finally free of Eeyore. We're celebrating your upgrade potential. One tequila shot and you'll forget he even had a name." One of her friends, Tara, I think, held out a shot to me. "For real, Allison, you were too pretty for that guy anyway." I didn't take the drink. I just turned around and went back upstairs, tears threatening to spill. But I didn't cry. Not then. I was too full of rage. That's when I realized something I should have seen years earlier. Jessica wasn't just cruel. She enjoyed it. She got off on making me small, fragile, ridiculous. And everyone around her? They clapped like trained seals every time she cracked a new insult. I wish I could say it ended after high school. It didn't. At college, she kept tabs on me through social media. Anytime I posted a photo, she'd comment something passive-aggressive. "Loving this lighting, super forgiving," or "Didn't know they let people bring their own makeup artist to the library." Once, I shared a photo from a costume party. I'd dressed up as Marie Curie, long black skirt, white blouse, a little faux beaker in hand. Jessica reposted it with the caption, "My sister, the radioactive virgin." It got over 300 likes. People thought it was hilarious. Even my relationships weren't safe. I dated a guy named Nolan during grad school. He was into environmental science, drove a hybrid, liked spoken word poetry. I adored him. We went to open mics together, shared playlists, cooked vegetarian meals from scratch. When Jessica met him at a Thanksgiving dinner, she waited until dessert before asking, "So are you the reason Allison stopped pretending to enjoy meat?" He smiled politely. I kicked her under the table. Later that night, she texted me, "He's cute and probably writes Yelp reviews for vitamins kinda way." Every time she did something like that, I told myself I wouldn't let it get to me. That it was just words, that I was stronger now. But it chipped away at me, bit by bit, year after year. Once, when I was 26, she invited me to one of her networking events. Said it would be good exposure for me. She was already getting booked for speaking gigs, and I was trying to launch a freelance research consulting business. I thought stupidly that maybe she wanted to help. I showed up in a navy blazer and slacks, my presentation slides prepped on a USB drive. The moment I walked into the hotel ballroom, I knew I didn't belong. Everyone was in sleek black, wine in hand, talking about brand alignment and scaling impact. Jessica saw me and said, "You look like a substitute teacher on her first day." Adorable. I turned to leave. She caught my arm. "I'm kidding," she said. "Relax. It's a vibe. People love authenticity." I should have walked out. Instead, I stayed. And during her panel, when she introduced me to the audience as my little sister, the scientist/librarians, I don't even know it, I smiled and waved. I smiled. I waved. I hated myself. The final straw came just before I turned 29. I was seeing someone new, Ethan. He was tall, lean, and wore these oversized sweaters that made him look like a book character. We met through a professional networking group for researchers. He was funny, insightful, kind. A little intense, but I liked that. I made the mistake of bringing him to family dinner. Jessica sized him up the second he walked in. During the meal, she leaned over and asked, "So, Do you two debate Nietzsche before bed, or are you more of a Kafka foreplay type? Ethan laughed, awkwardly. I actually like Kafka. She smirked. Of course you do. He never called me again after that. I didn't ask why. I knew. That was Jessica's gift. She didn't have to push you off the cliff. She just whispered loud enough until you jumped yourself. It was a Sunday in late October when Mom called to say Jessica was engaged. Her voice practically burst through the phone speaker. Isn't that just wonderful? He's a doctor. Well, a doctor of psychology, but still. His name is Alex. Oh, you'll love him. I didn't say anything at first. I stared at the wall of my tiny apartment, the one I'd moved into after the Liam debacle, and tried to picture what this new fiancé looked like. Another corporate smile? Another glossed-over trophy in her collection? I agreed to meet them that Thursday. I figured I'd get it over with. Jessica chose a trendy new restaurant downtown. Oak tables, hanging plants, servers in denim aprons who looked like they moonlighted as indie musicians. I arrived 5 minutes late and saw them already seated by the window. Jessica waved like we hadn't seen each other in years, not 3 weeks ago at Mom's birthday. She was wearing one of those silk blouses that looked effortless but cost more than my rent. Her hair was perfect. Her skin glowed like she'd swallowed a ring light. And beside her sat Alex. He stood to shake my hand. Allison, he said warmly. It's really great to finally meet you. I was caught off guard by how normal he looked. Kind eyes, neatly groomed beard, a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. No flashy watch, no designer logo peeking out from his chest. He had the kind of voice that made you lean in without realizing you were doing it. Still, something about him didn't fit. He smiled at Jessica like he was supposed to, said all the right things, but his eyes never stayed on her for long. They wandered. To the menu, to the candles, and occasionally to me. Just for a second too long. Dinner was what you'd expect. Jessica monopolized the conversation. She told stories from their recent trip to Santa Barbara, dropped hints about the wedding were not doing anything huge, just tasteful, and corrected Alex at least 3 times. At one point, when he mentioned they'd met at a conference on trauma therapy, Jessica laughed and said, he was talking about PTSD and I was thinking, God, this man needs a wardrobe update. Alex chuckled along, but it was the kind of laugh you give when you know what happens if you don't. Halfway through dessert, I excused myself to the restroom. When I came back, Alex was alone at the table. Jessica had stepped out to take a call. Hey, he said, shifting in his seat. Can I ask you something weird? I raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. He leaned in slightly. Do you ever get the feeling like you're watching a show about someone who thinks they're the main character, but the camera is really on everyone else? I blinked. Excuse me. He gave a small laugh. Sorry. That sounded more cryptic than I meant. It's just, Jessica. She's great, don't get me wrong. She's impressive. But sometimes I feel like I'm in a reality show I didn't audition for. Like, I'm supposed to say my lines, hit my marks, but it's not really about me. I stared at him, unsure what to say. Then he added quieter, I just thought maybe you'd get it. Before I could respond, Jessica returned. Her expression tightened the moment she saw us leaning in across the table. She put her phone down like a hammer. Did I miss something? Just talking about psychology, Alex said smoothly. Your sister's really insightful. Jessica didn't reply. She just picked up her wineglass. Over the next few weeks, we saw more of each other. Mom invited me to a few family events, engagement dinners, planning meetings, and one awkward brunch that turned into a slideshow presentation of Jessica's dream venues. I kept catching Alex watching her the way someone watches a magic trick they're no longer convinced is real. Once, during a lunch at Mom's, he offered to help me bring down some boxes from the attic. Jessica was downstairs, FaceTiming a wedding planner. When we got upstairs, he sat on one of the boxes inside. I used to think she was the most alive person I'd ever met, he said. But now, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm a mirror, just reflecting back what she wants to see. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't about to speak against her. That was a dangerous game, and I wasn't trying to get dragged into her drama again. But he kept talking. I proposed because it felt like the natural thing. But the more time I spend with your family, the more I realize how many people orbit around her without ever really landing. Has she always been like this? I shrugged. You ever watch someone smile while slicing into a steak? That's Jessica. She makes everything look beautiful, even when she's cutting into someone. He went quiet after that. We didn't bring it up again. Things started getting weird after Jessica asked me to be her maid of honor. It wasn't a request. It was a declaration. Obviously it has to be you, she said. I mean, you're my sister. We can't even make it a narrative, like overcoming our differences. Guests love that emotional arc. I said yes. Not because I wanted to, but because saying no would have meant endless fights with Mom, accusations of bitterness, maybe even disinvites from the wedding entirely. I didn't have the energy. Jessica began dragging me to appointments, dresses, makeup trials, tastings. Every time she controlled everything. The colors, the playlist, the facial expressions I was allowed to make in photos. Alex was often absent. Work, he said. Conferences. Papers. But I noticed the change. The light behind his eyes dimmed a little more each week. Then came the night of the bachelorette party. Jessica rented out a rooftop bar. There were neon signs, champagne fountains, a hired photographer, and a guest list of women who looked like they'd stepped off a Pinterest board. I felt like furniture. Midway through the night, after the fifth round of shots and endless screaming to early 2000s pop, I slipped out to the fire escape. I needed air. Alex was already there. He looked startled at first, then relieved. "You too," he said, nodding toward the party inside. I leaned against the railing. "She wants this night to be a music video. She wants every day to be a music video," he said. "But I can't keep dancing." That night, he didn't confess anything scandalous. He didn't hit on me. He didn't say he wanted out. But he looked at me like someone searching for a way out of a maze he didn't realize he'd entered. And I realized I wasn't the only one who had spent their life trying to keep up with Jessica. Only difference was I'd stopped running. He was still trying to catch his breath. I didn't start with a plan. I didn't sit down and think, all right, time to build a case. It began like most things in my life had, quietly in the background, while Jessica assumed I was doing absolutely nothing. It was the morning after the bachelorette party. My head throbbed from the cheap champagne and fake laughter, but more than anything, I couldn't shake the conversation with Alex on the fire escape. It kept looping in my mind, the way he said, "I can't keep dancing." Jessica wasn't just suffocating him. She was rewiring his entire world, one subtle command at a time. And somehow, despite everything, I felt responsible. Not for Jessica, not even for Alex, but for seeing it happen and doing nothing. So I started paying attention. The first thing I did was buy a burner phone. Prepaid, untraceable, just in case. I saved it for screenshots, photos, voice memos, anything that might become evidence. I didn't know yet what I was building, but I knew what I was collecting wasn't meant to be forgotten. It started innocently, snapping a photo of Jessica mid-rant at a florist when they didn't carry the shade of ivory she'd specified, recording her through my bag at brunch as she casually told a story about how Alex cried after a nightmare and she almost laughed, but then remembered men have feelings now. Then came the texts. I'd always known Jessica was the kind of person who liked to keep doors open. Old flings, old flames. But when I borrowed her laptop one day during wedding planning to check an email, I noticed something strange. Her browser autofilled an old username I remembered from years ago, JessQueen88. I typed it into Facebook out of habit, and suddenly I was inside an alternate universe she'd created. Under that name, she'd been messaging David. Mike David. The one she humiliated and mocked out of my life. At first, the messages seemed harmless. Just reconnecting, liking a few old photos, commenting under posts from months ago with things like, "Can't believe how good you still look," or "Remember that night by the lake." But then it escalated. I always wondered if you and I had dated instead of me letting Allison get to you first. And the worst one, she never really understood you the way I did. That one hit me like a gut punch. I screen captured everything. Every thread. Every timestamp. Every reply. David hadn't replied to most of them, but he hadn't blocked her either. That's when I knew. Jessica wasn't just toxic. She was surgical. She dismantled people, piece by piece, and acted like it was a makeover. Next, I looked into Alex. He wasn't on social media much, but Jessica's obsession with curating his life online made things easier. She tagged him in photos that showed far too much, credit card numbers peeking from his wallet, prescription bottles left on tables, his full birth date, and a happy birthday to the love of my life caption. It took 10 minutes to pull a soft credit inquiry on him. That's when I saw it. A loan. $38,000. Opened 2 months ago, through an online fintech company based out of California. In Alex's name. Listed email? A dummy Gmail account, Alex. I knew for a fact that wasn't his email. He'd once texted me from his real one to send a paper he wanted feedback on, a.connors.official@. The other account? Jessica's doing. I dug further. The IP address linked to the application was based in Madison, Jessica's apartment Wi-Fi. I took screenshots, saved them, called the loan company, and pretended to be his assistant. They wouldn't give me much, but the little they confirmed was enough. Jessica had submitted the application herself. Alex didn't know. I needed to be sure, though. So I started talking to people around Jessica, people she didn't think I'd bother remembering. There was Claire, her old college roommate. I hadn't spoken to her since a New Year's Eve party in 2014, but she answered my message. "I always thought she'd go into PR or con artistry," Claire wrote. She was terrifying. I asked if she'd ever seen Jessica do anything shady, something financial, maybe involving someone else's identity. Once, she typed back. She forged a professor's signature to get out of a failing grade. But she was too charming to get caught. Then there was Mateo, one of Jessica's exes from years ago, a musician she dated for all of 2 months before ghosting him mid-tour. I found him on Instagram. He was still salty. "She told me she lost her phone," he wrote. "Found out later she was already dating someone else and never bothered to break up." I asked if she'd ever talked badly about Alex while they were together. His reply? A screenshot. It was a DM from Jessica. "I don't even know if I like him. He's so small. Emotionally. Intellectually. Just dull. But he looks good next to me, and that counts for something, right?" The message was dated 3 weeks before the engagement announcement. I saved it. And I kept going. Jessica had no idea I was building a fortress of her lies behind her back. Every time we smiled at dinner, every time she handed me a clipboard full of bridal tasks, I was watching. Recording. Listening. One day, she left her iPad at Mom's house. I told her I'd bring it by. Instead, I opened the notes app. There were lists. Things Alex doesn't need to know. Lone call with David, kissing Tyler. Who the hell was Tyler? Therapy notes I skimmed. Another note read, "What if Allison turns this into one of her sad stories?" I nearly laughed. She had no idea how right she was. I transferred every file from that iPad to a hidden folder on my cloud drive. Every note, every photo, every audio file she'd recorded rehearsing speeches, some of them with disturbing levels of scripted affection. "Alex, I knew from the moment we met that I could make you into something wonderful." I began printing everything. I wasn't taking chances. I compiled 3 folders: digital, print, and backup. Labeled and color-coded. It was obsessive, I'll admit. But I needed to be prepared. She wouldn't gaslight her way out of this one. Every time I looked at Alex now, I saw the confusion in his eyes, the way he waited to be told what he felt. And I felt sick. This woman, my sister, wasn't planning a wedding. She was orchestrating a stage production where no one else got to write their lines. And she thought I was just the stagehand again, quiet and out of the way. Not this time. It was never going to be a wedding. Not in the traditional sense. From the very beginning, Jessica planned it as an exhibit, a curated piece of performance art wrapped in hashtags and professionally edited reels. A spectacle, not a ceremony. A brand expansion, not a commitment. She rented a vineyard in Door County, not just for the day, but for the entire week leading up to the wedding. "It's all about immersion," she said, as if it were a film set. And in many ways it was. Vineyard staff were asked to sign NDAs. She flew in a production crew from LA who called themselves content architects. They arrived with drones, gimbals, softboxes, and a shot list longer than the wedding vows. There was no wedding planner, Jessica was the planner. And producer. And lead actress. The dress fittings were scheduled like film wardrobe sessions. I remember standing in the bridal suite at Everwood Estate, watching as 4 stylists circled her, pinning, steaming, adjusting. Jessica wasn't just trying on a dress. She was sculpting an image. The gown itself was a nightmare. Imported lace, backless, with a hand-embroidered train that needed 2 people to lift. Cost? $18,600. Not including the Swarovski veil. "It's not just a dress," she said, posing in front of the antique mirror. "It's content." But even in that moment, I saw the crack in the reflection. Alex wasn't there for any of the fittings. He'd said something about work. Something about deadlines. Jessica dismissed it, but I noticed the way her mouth twitched when his name came up. I could tell she didn't like how he was suddenly harder to control. And she hated not having control. 2 days before the wedding, everything started to fall apart. It began with the dresses. Not Jessica's, ours. The bridesmaids' gowns arrived from a boutique in New York, custom-made to her specifications. Dusty lavender silk, off-shoulder, floor length, and, according to Jessica, designed to flatter every body type. In reality, they were stitched nightmares. I slipped mine on and instantly felt like a trussed turkey. Worse, the fabric had water damage. 3 out of 5 gowns had blotchy discoloration along the hem, and one had a tear beneath the zipper. Jessica screamed when she saw them. I gave that woman exact instructions. She swore it was handled. Tears threatened her false lashes. She immediately called the boutique on speaker, pacing the hall like a CEO in a meltdown. Everyone else stood frozen, including the other bridesmaids, Cleo, her old roommate, Hannah, her podcast co-host, and Val, some socialite from New York I'd never met before. Cleo muttered, "This is worse than that time she canceled our trip to Tulum because she chipped a nail." Eventually, Jessica found a solution. Overnight rush a second set of dresses, at triple the cost. "It'll be fine," she said, smoothing her blouse. Crisis fuels creativity. The next crack came during the rehearsal dinner. Dad tried to make a toast. He stood, glass in hand, and started speaking about watching both my girls grow up and how marriage is about learning when to be silent. Jessica interrupted him. "Dad, could you maybe stick to the part about love and joy? This is going on Instagram." There was a pause, thick and cold. He laughed uncomfortably, then sat down. Later, in the hallway, I found him staring out at the vineyard. "I thought I was giving a speech," he said, voice low. "Turns out I was just reading a caption." Then there was the blow-up with Aunt Rosie. She'd flown in from Arizona, tired, wearing orthopedic sandals and carrying a plastic Tupperware of cookies, just like when the girls were little. Jessica took one look and pulled me aside. "She cannot wear that to the reception." "And what is that in her hand?" "Cookies," I said. "From your childhood." "She's not bringing a goddamn lunchbox to my wedding, Allison. This isn't a potluck in Wisconsin Dells." The argument that followed involved 3 raised voices, one slammed door, and Rosie checking out of the inn that night. She sent me a text the next morning. "Tell your sister I didn't come for the wine. I came because I thought she still had a soul." I didn't show it to Jessica. I didn't need to. The day before the wedding was the final rehearsal. The photographer, a French guy named Theo with a man bun and zero tolerance for imperfection, snapped at the lighting crew, stormed off twice, and told Jessica her smile looked too self-aware. "Excuse me," she said, blinking. "You smile like someone who is watching themselves smile. It's not organic." She froze. I saw it. That split second where her face twitched, not from hurt, but from rage. He didn't know he'd just insulted the only thing Jessica truly believed in, the power of her presentation. After he left, she gathered us for one last dry run. We stood in the vineyard as the sun dipped low, golden hour casting long shadows. Jessica handed me her phone. "Record this," she said. I held up the camera. She walked barefoot down the cobblestone path, trailing the hem of her rehearsal dress behind her, arms out like she was floating. Halfway down, a gust of wind blew dust across her face. She blinked, turned, and snapped, "Start again." I wasn't ready. I hit stop. And for a second, she just stared at me. "What?" she asked. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. By now, the smiles were strained. The laughter was timed. The magic? Gone. Alex arrived that evening, hours late. Jessica confronted him in private, but the walls in that old inn were thin. I heard it from the next room. "Where were you?" she hissed. "Work," he said flatly. "Are you cheating?" Silence. Then, "Are you?" Another silence. Then footsteps. The next morning, Jessica posted a video of them smiling on a porch swing captioned, "Forever starts now." No filter needed. It had 3 filters. The morning of the wedding, the new bridesmaid dresses arrived. Mine was a size too small. Jessica told me to just breathe differently. The florist showed up late and missing 2 centerpieces. The hairstylist got food poisoning and had to be replaced at the last second. The backup stylist styled Jessica's hair too tightly. It looked perfect in photos, but when she turned, I saw the pin marks on her scalp. And through it all, Jessica smiled. She smiled when the florist snapped at the planner. She smiled when the wind blew her veil into a patch of mud. She smiled when the cake arrived in the wrong shade of white. That smile held like a stretched rubber band. One small tug, and the whole thing would snap. After the ceremony rehearsal, she cornered me near the fountain. "I need you to say something tomorrow," she said. "During your toast." "What kind of something?" She handed me a folded paper. I opened it. It was a pre-written speech. About sisterhood. About forgiveness. About how Jessica's love taught me how to love myself. "Absolutely not," I said. Her smile faltered. "You'll do it," she said. "You owe me. This whole thing is bigger than us." "No," I replied. "This whole thing is you. It always has been." She stared at me. For once, no words. Just static silence. I walked away. The wedding was less than 24 hours away. And I knew, without a doubt, the spectacle she had built was already collapsing in on itself. She just didn't know it yet. The morning of Jessica's wedding dawned unnaturally still. The vineyard was swaddled in fog, low and thick like a stage curtain waiting to be pulled back. I stood at the balcony of the guest cottage, looking down at rows of white chairs, floral arches, and pale rose petals arranged like an ad in a luxury bridal magazine. Everything was ready. Everything looked flawless, which meant something was about to go wrong. I dressed in silence. The bridesmaid dress still didn't fit right, tight under the arms, cutting into my ribs. Jessica had insisted it be elegant and fitted, which in her language meant suffocating. My hair had been styled hours earlier by a new professional flown in from Chicago, Fiona, who spent most of her time whispering on her phone in Hungarian between brushing curls. By noon, the guests had arrived. Jessica made her entrance with choreographed grace, escorted by 2 flower girls she'd recruited from the vineyard owner's family, he had no idea, dressed in miniature versions of her gown. The photographer, Theo, ran backwards ahead of her down the aisle, capturing every fake candid smile and side profile. She looked perfect. That's not bitterness. It's fact. My sister knew how to perform beauty like no one else. But even as she passed me on her way to the altar, I noticed a tremble in her fingers. A flicker of something uncertain behind her eyes. Alex wasn't waiting at the altar. The music played on, violinists Jessica hired from Minneapolis, all dressed in black, fingers moving like ghosts. A few guests shifted in their seats. I saw Mom frown, glance around. Aunt Ruth leaned over and whispered something to Dad. Theo paused. His camera lowered slightly. Jessica stood at the front of the aisle, still smiling, barely blinking. Then a waiter stepped forward. His name tag read, Derek. He was young, maybe 22, and looked confused holding a white envelope in both hands. He looked to the officiant, a sleek woman named Daniela whom Jessica had found on Instagram for her progressive elegance style. Daniela nodded. "Excuse me," Derek said, his voice trembling slightly. "I was asked to read this." Jessica didn't move. She just turned her head slowly, smile frozen in place. Derek unfolded the letter. The sun broke through the clouds behind him. He read, "To everyone here today. First, thank you for coming. I know many of you traveled far. Some of you gave time, money, support, or just love. I know this was meant to be a celebration of commitment. And that's exactly why I can't go through with it. I will not be marrying Jessica. Not because I don't care for her, I do. I did. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being a relationship and started becoming a product. I am not a prop. I am not an accessory. I will not spend the rest of my life being a background character in someone else's brand strategy. I asked for love. I got a marketing campaign. This relationship became a series of staged moments and controlled narratives. I no longer know what's real. I'm not sure she does either. So I'm walking away, not to hurt her, but to save myself. I hope one day she finds someone who wants to be part of the show. I just want a life. Alex." For a moment, no one breathed. It was as if sound itself had stopped. Then the murmur began. The front row, Jessica's influencer friends and sponsors, whispered frantically, phones already raised. The older relatives looked stunned, some blinking as if trying to understand what they'd just heard. One of the flower girls asked her mother, "Is the man still coming?" Jessica didn't move. Her face was frozen. Not shocked. Not even angry. Just paused. Like she was waiting for someone to yell cut. No one did. I saw Theo lower his camera and murmured under his breath. Alex was nowhere to be seen. He hadn't shown up at the vineyard. He hadn't driven in. Later, we learned he'd booked a flight the night before and left at sunrise. He was already in another state by the time the ceremony began. Jessica turned, slowly. Her hands clenched the bouquet so tightly. A rose stem snapped, thorns puncturing the silk wrap. "Allison," she said quietly, lips barely moving. "Where is he?" I didn't answer. "Did you know?" she asked. Everyone was watching us now. I met her eyes. I guess not everything can be scripted. She stared at me like she didn't recognize my face. And maybe in that moment, she didn't. Behind us, Daniela cleared her throat. "Well, that concludes today's ceremony. The vineyard staff will still be serving the scheduled lunch on the terrace." People didn't know what to do. Some clapped, out of habit. Others got up, whispering. I saw Mom sitting frozen beside Dad, whose hands were shaking slightly as he poured water into a glass. Aunt Ruth had her phone out and was already texting someone. Jessica stood there another minute. Then, without a word, she turned and walked off the stage. Not toward the exit, not toward the guests, but straight toward the back of the vineyard, down a gravel path, bouquet dangling, veil trailing behind her like a shredded kite. The videographers followed her, at first. Then even they stopped. She disappeared around the corner of the winery's barrel cellar. Someone near me whispered, "Was this part of the act?" Another answered, "No. That was real." For the first time in her life, Jessica didn't have a closing scene. She didn't get to choose how the story ended. And everyone saw it. It only took 24 hours for Jessica to try and reclaim the narrative. By the next morning, she'd already deleted every photo of Alex from her Instagram. The perfectly filtered engagement shots, the future Mr. Mrs. captions, the sponsored posts with matching robes and champagne bottles, all gone. Erased like chalk on a dry sidewalk after rain. In their place, she posted a single image, a black and white photo of herself standing alone in the vineyard, back turned to the camera, her train spilling behind her like a trail of ash. The caption read, "Sometimes love means letting go. Grateful for the lessons. Stronger now." I stared at it for a long time. The comments were as you'd expect, supportive, performative, blind. "You're so brave. Your light still shines. He didn't deserve your magic." Queen behavior. She was spinning the story. To her audience, Alex wasn't the one who walked away. He was the one who couldn't handle her power. The wedding wasn't a collapse. It was a redirection. She was never abandoned. She chose herself. But the problem with living life as a performance is that eventually someone else takes control of the camera. And this time it wasn't her. It started with the vineyard staff. Two servers, Derek, the one who read the letter, and a young woman named Hallie, posted anonymously on Reddit. The thread title was, "I worked at an influencer's wedding and it imploded mid-ceremony. AMA. It blew up." The comments were brutal. People shared screenshots. The letter Alex had written was reposted line by line. Someone leaked a rehearsal video where Jessica berated the florist. Another guest uploaded footage of her interrupting her own father's toast. It didn't take long for people to piece it together. I didn't say anything publicly. I didn't have to. Other voices did it for me. Val, the socialite bridesmaid from New York, posted a TikTok 2 days later. It started as a simple story time. "You ever been a bridesmaid for someone who thought her wedding was a Coachella headlining slot?" 500,000 views. Then came Cleo, her former roommate. "We all knew it was fake," she said, face bare, hair in a messy bun. "But we pretended for her like always." "I'm done pretending." Hannah, the podcast co-host, went silent. Deleted their entire show archive the same week. Even Aunt Rosie, who never used social media, gave a statement to a local journalist from the Door County Chronicle, who had attended the wedding as a distant cousin of the vineyard owners. "Jessica didn't lose her groom," Rosie said in the article. "She lost the script. And without it, she had nothing to say." For a few days, Jessica went quiet. Then she called me. It was a Thursday. I was folding laundry. I stared at her name on the screen. For once, I didn't feel dread. Just curiosity. I answered. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "Hi. Hi. I assume you've seen what's happening." "I have." She paused. "I need to ask you something." "Go ahead. Did you plan this?" I didn't respond right away. She continued. "Be honest. Were you working with Alex?" "No," I said. "Then how did everyone find out?" "I didn't tell them," I said simply. "They saw it for themselves." Another pause. She hated silences. Hated empty air where she couldn't fill it with narrative. "I don't deserve this," she said eventually. "Maybe not," I replied. "But it's not about what anyone deserves anymore. You sound proud of yourself." "I'm not proud," I said. "I'm relieved. I didn't burn anything down. I just opened the window." Click. She hung up. A week later, Jessica went live on Instagram. She sat in front of a ring light, hairstyled, makeup perfect, wearing a cream-colored sweater that made her look soft and reflective. The tone was familiar, subdued, gracious, calculated. "Hey everyone. I want to thank you for your messages, your support. This week has been hard. I've had to process a lot. But I've also learned. About myself, about love, about what I want." She looked directly into the camera. To those who were hurt by what happened, especially our guests, I'm truly sorry. I didn't mean to turn something so intimate into a stage. That was never my intention. Lies, neatly wrapped. Then came the kicker. My sister and I are taking time apart. I wish her well. I just hope one day she can move past whatever it is she's been holding on to. There it was. The twist. She couldn't paint herself as a hero anymore, so she framed herself as a martyr. And me? I became the shadow again. The bitter, jealous, emotionally stunted little sister who never learned how to clap for someone else. But this time people didn't buy it. The comments under the video weren't what she expected. This feels performative. Apologies don't work when they come with shade. Girl, just stop. We all saw the video. She turned off comments within the hour. Then, someone leaked the loan application. A user on Twitter, Riciat Sandrumers, posted screenshots from the fintech company Alex's name had been used with. The dummy email. The linked IP. The application submitted from Madison. Then came the Facebook messages to David, the DMs to Tyler, the notes app lists she thought no one would ever see. I didn't leak them. I didn't have to. Alex did. He created a separate account, posted a statement. I stayed silent to protect her. That was my mistake. That's all it said. But it was enough. The backlash was immediate. Brands dropped her. A major wellness platform canceled her speaking engagement. Her newsletter lost thousands of subscribers overnight. And me? I was still living in my small apartment with the peeling paint, still working part-time at the archive, still drinking lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug every morning. But everything felt different. Not because the internet had chosen a side. Because for once, the truth wasn't buried under a filter. People saw. They finally saw. Mom called me a week later. She was tired. Softer than usual. I didn't know it was that bad, she said. I did, I replied. I just didn't think anyone would believe me. Silence. Then, I'm sorry. I didn't say anything. There wasn't much else to say. Weeks passed. Jessica disappeared from social media. Her last post was a quote from some Rumi poem about rebuilding from ashes. But there were no new uploads, no vlogs, no polished captions. People stopped talking about her. And maybe that was the worst punishment of all. She didn't lose everything because of me. She lost it because she finally ran out of ways to control the story. I didn't destroy her wedding. I didn't sabotage her life. I didn't expose her out of revenge. I just stopped protecting her lies. I lifted the curtain. And the truth was louder than the show.